Hello, in this video I intend to establish the differences in the Polybase functionality of SQL Server 2022 in Windows versus Linux. According to documentation, they're supposed to be the same. However, I find that the capabilities of Polybase on SQL Server 2022 running on Linux to be identical to that on SQL Server 2019. So to establish this, I'm running a very simple scenario. I have a Azure storage container configured as an Azure Data Lake Service Gen 2. It has one container called AdventureWorks 2019 in it. And within this container are a number of folders. I'm just going to focus on person_person, which has one Parquet file, which is the entire contents of the person.person table within the AdventureWorks 2019 database. So now that I've established that I have this destination, I'm also going to mention that on my machine I have this virtual machine, which is running Windows 10 SQL Server 2022 Developer Edition with Polybase installed. I'm not going to show anything particular about this installation. I'm going to prove that it is as I say by running the following notebook. So I'll start off by connecting to that SQL Server instance. I can prove that I'm connected to the appropriate SQL Server instance by showing here that it is SQL Server 2022 RTM. It is Developer Edition running on Windows 10. This is the server name. First thing I'm going to do is create a database to operate within called AdventureWorks 2019, and I'll make sure that I'm using that database. Just to establish Polybase is installed and configured. You can see here I'm not actually changing the values that was already configured as such. Now I'm going to go ahead and create some Polybase configurations. I need a master key. I need to create a credential to access that Azure storage. So I already have a shared access signature that I've already created that I will use here. So I have a configuration for an external data source using ADLS to the appropriate location. I'll go ahead and set that up. And it's at this point I should be able to configure that table, and when I run this I do in fact get a way to connect to that table and query against it. I could go on to actually creating a table, but this is enough to establish that I have 2022 Polybase functionality, because you cannot connect to an ADLS using this prefix. You do not have the capability of doing an open row set query of Parquet files living in ADLS with 2019. So these are two aspects that are only possible with the latest version of SQL Server Polybase. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe this out and close this. Next I'm going to establish that I can indeed, or I'm going to power on this virtual machine. This virtual machine has Ubuntu 20.04 on it, and it's a clean installation. So I'm going to find that I am unable to, it doesn't have SQL Server on it. I'm going to walk through the installation of SQL Server just to prove that I am doing it the correct way. So it takes a minute for it to start up. And now that I've got it started up, I'm actually going to access it through a SSH terminal. So I have a configured entry in here to this instance. This is the same instance. So to make sure that I can do what I need to, I'm going to sudo in interactive so that I'm as root. So the first couple things I'm going to do is just copy this text right off of the Microsoft web page, setting up the repo to get SQL Server 2022 installed. And it's at this point that I can go ahead and install SQL Server. Now that SQL Server is installed, I can go ahead and set it up. Opt for the Developer Edition, accept the licensing terms, set a password. And it's at this point that I should see that SQL Server is indeed running. Now that SQL Server is running, I'm just going to go ahead and install Polybase as well. I can see that the version associated with the Polybase is the same as the RTM SQL engine, so that looks good. And I'll go ahead and restart SQL Server. Check the status of it. It looks like it's running. Okay, let's go back to our notebook. Now that Polybase is installed with SQL Server on Linux, let's go ahead and run the same configuration. So I'll go ahead and connect to my instance. Just to establish that I'm connected to the correct instance, you can see here it is a SQL Server 2022 instance. Developer edition on Linux, Ubuntu 2004, and there's the name of the server. So I'm going to do the same thing as I did before. Well, actually, I'll start off by doing the Polybase configuration. Here you can see I did in fact change the configuration of Polybase enabled, and I'm going to flip back to the instance and I'm just going to go ahead and restart SQL Server after enabling Polybase. See that it looks like it has enabled Polybase, and it should be good to go. Going on, I will create my database. I'll use my database. I'll create my master key. I'll create using the same credentials before. And I'll go ahead and create an external data source that ADLS, which fails. Interesting thing about this prefix is this prefix was introduced in 2022 along with this capability. I know that because if I flip to my documentation here, I can see all my prefixes ADLS starting with SQL Server 2022.